So I'm going to talk about us as leaders recognizing the impacts of our work on the staff and how we can account for those direct impacts on the staff that we have in our respective offices, and how we have taken steps in my office to build a more resilient and stronger approach so we can meet every challenge that comes at us as a DA's office. And also that leads directly into retaining employees for longer and making sure that in the time they're here that they're doing better, that they're healthier and feeling supported by the office, but also able to take on the different cases and challenges that we ask them to do. So everything I'm going to share with you, I'm happy to send to you if you have any interest in it. I will also say the things I'm going to go through today did not cost us any more as an office. So the improvements we put in place, the programs we built, we've been able to either use existing resources in our budget or bring in grant funding to help us add things to the office and build more improvements to support the staff. So one thing, and this is a flyer that you see on the screen that we've shared with our staff years ago, and it talks about the stress and trauma that impacts everyone who works in a district attorney's office and how those impacts can be felt in different ways and at different times. And I'll just share with you on a personal level, this is not necessarily my strong suit. This is not something where if you asked me 20 years ago if I thought I'd be leading an office where this was a priority, I would not have guessed it. But I just came to learn over time that these things do impact our staff. And if we want to truly have the best possible office, we have to account for these things, help support people through these challenges, and recognize that it should be a part of the office in our everyday culture. So you see on this particular screen, we're talking to staff about the different kinds of impacts that trauma, whether it's secondary or vicarious trauma, can have, and how to watch out for those warning signs. And then we have some tips at the bottom of the flyer there on how individuals can take care of themselves and discharge stress. And this is a flyer that we send out at least once a year to our staff. We also do in-house trainings. We reference it often in emails to the staff and also in our monthly meetings we have with all staff. And I think as a DA community, overall, we've come a long way. I will share with you, I was at the Manhattan VA's office after 9/11, and Chris may have a different memory of it, but I don't recall any efforts by the office after 9/11 to account for the impacts and devastation that occurred in downtown Manhattan and across the country on 9/11.
You
And
have
to
5 minutes.
me, we've come a long way in handling these things. And we've done that by trying to build a well-being program. So you see there on the screen a few things that I can highlight for you. First, on the bottom right, we have facility dogs in our office. We currently have 2 dogs that are available not only for staff, but to support victims and witnesses who come into the office. We have specialized clinicians. So we have 2 private counselors available on retainer. We pay for those clinicians, counselors, but we never know who's meeting with them or what they're discussing. And I can tell you, getting the bill every month, that there are people definitely making use of that resource. And at the end of the month, it's usually a few $100s in cost, but it pays huge dividends. And we built this culture in the office by having the annual trainings, outside speakers, point people within the office, all designed to make sure that within our own culture, that we're accounting for well-being every single day. One thing I would stress is these do benefit our office every day. I see it in terms of how people discuss the work, how they account for one another before they show each other photos or videos from cases, how thoughtful they are about that, how mindful they are about minimizing impact of trauma. But it also helped us as an office prepare for a really terrible day we had here in Boulder County. We've had a couple of significant events in Boulder County, but the one I'll highlight for you is a mass murder at a local supermarket where 10 community members were gunned down. And I was so grateful that we had so many supports in place before the mass shooting took place. So you see here on your screen, we set up a first responder appreciation expo. This was just a few weeks after the mass shooting, but it's because we had already established relationships with community partners and within our office to make sure that we had support for people available to us. And then as a result of that, we helped form what became the Boulder Strong Resource Center. This was available not only to the victims' families and all their community members, as well as people in the store, but also to first responders, community members, and our office. So the Boulder Strong Resource Center was in place for a couple of years. In fact, the picture you see on the bottom left of the screen, it's a tree of life. It was painted by a local artist. It now hangs on the wall outside my office here. It's the Boulder Strong Resource Center closed after a few years. But the point being, during the time the resource center was open, they also came to our office once a month and provided free massage, acu-detox, meditation therapy, and so on. So we've done a lot in the area of wellness. None of this cost any additional money for our office. One thing we did do is partner with the public defender's office. We went to the legislature and got money set aside by the state for wellness programs for every district attorney's office in the state of Colorado. We've never, as a DA community, we've never used all those funds in a given year, and it's proven really essential, especially for non-Metro DA's offices. So our office has enough funding to cover the things I've talked about thus far. But the non-Metro DA's offices struggle more with funding. So that state fund that we set up with the public defender's office has been really helpful. And overall, with retention, what I would hit on here is when I came in as district attorney in 2018, one of the complaints I heard from when I met with each member of the staff before I started was that the salaries were too low compared to the rest of the metro area in Colorado, and that they were not necessarily consistent or in line with one another or their positions and responsibilities. So we did a complete overhaul of all the salaries in the office. We continue to treat salaries as a priority. I learned that at the Manhattan DA's office, working for District Attorney Robin Lowenthal, and he really impressed upon me how important this is for each and every office. So we've made salaries a priority, and sometimes we've been really innovative, thoughtful, and purposeful in structuring our office budget in a way that has allowed us to give raises every single year since I came into office, even during some funding crises.
1 minute remaining.
We extended our childcare leave to 6 months for every employee. Also, we have an infant policy where people can bring their kids in when they're under age 1 into the DA's office and have their kids in the office, which helps tremendously with childcare costs and family needs. We now have also, when employees join the office, they're given 80 hours of leave right at the start. So on their first day, they have 80 hours of vacation time. And that goes a long way to help people with wellness and retention, but also on the hiring side. We have 1 day of remote work, at least, for each unit in the office. We just, as of yesterday, launched a peer support program that I'm really excited about, where we'll have certified peer support employees in the office helping one another. We've done a lot on analyzing case loads, and we have a data dashboard that I use for that to make sure no one's being overwhelmed by the workload. We've put a lot of support staff positions in place to help our prosecutors with the changes in technology. We've added 6 paralegals since I started to help with body-worn camera and so on. But I know my time is up. I'll stop there, and I'm happy to take any questions you have.
I'm just a little curious about people bringing their kids to work and how that works in the, kind of busy environment of a DA's office.
So good question. And I had a healthy amount of skepticism when we launched it, but it's worked great. In part because it starts with a written agreement that the employee has to sign, that there are certain conditions, including just keeping the overall office functioning. And the reason it's worked is because we have an office culture where people are really supportive of one another. So it's not unusual for me to see another employee holding the baby and helping with the baby in those moments. And it's helped us have people come back from childcare leave, bring their kid into the office. Childcare leave is so expensive right now that we're helping on that front as well. But there's never been an issue. I mean, it's not unusual that I walk around the office and I see an infant, but I really mean it. I've never once heard a crying kid, and I've never once received a complaint that someone's disruptive. And it's because the employee is really thoughtful about it and wants to comply with the agreement. But also the employees around that person tend to be really team-oriented and want to help. And I think it adds a really wonderful dynamic to the office overall. So although I was a healthy skeptic at the start, I am now a convinced believer that it's helped us as an office.
I did notice that you have a 6-month maternity leave, but there was a caveat on it that if they take that long, you had a caveat. Could you explain that?
Sure, and I stole that from the Manhattan DA's office, which anyway, when we were there back in the day, people could take up to 6 months, and that's been my goal for many years here in Colorado, is to be in an office and lead an office where we had 6 months of childcare leave. So we have the 3 months allowed on the FMLA side, and then we add an additional 3 months. So there's coverage required by attorneys and staff in the office to make sure we can make it all work. But we've asked people if they're going to take that leave to come back for at least 1 year after. I did not threaten civil action or that we would demand the salary back if they failed to do that. because I didn't want to create that possible threat, and I was likely not going to carry it out. So instead, what I did when I rolled it out, and what we tell every employee who's going out on childcare leave is, we're allowing you to do this for your teammates, with the understanding that they're going to cover for you and they're going to go above and beyond for months. So don't do this to them if you're not actually going to come back for at least a year. And every employee that's done it thus far, and we've had it in place for 3 or 4 years now, every employee who's done it has come back for at least a year and continued to serve in the office. And as a result, we've been able to retain great people. Instead of having to deal with that tough first year back, they've been able to take longer period with family at home before returning to the office.
Jason, I believe you had a question?
The going to the legislature for the money, is that something that you in Colorado have to do for a lot of items, or was this a specific thing you went to? And if so, could you share the materials you used to get that funding?
So I'm happy to share the draft bill, and then I'll share the policy that we have with the statewide District Attorneys Council here in Colorado. We as an office did not need the additional funding, and we have not had to use the additional funding to maintain all the programs we have in place. We've been able to do what we've done with existing resources. But the reason I participated so strongly in that process was for the non-metro DA's offices, and we want to make sure that they have the support that we all want to see in our offices. So for the legislature in Colorado, yes, we'd have to go to the legislature to get additional funding set aside for something like that. And we have to apply, if an office uses it, we have to apply for reimbursement through the state DA's council.
Do you extend these benefits to the clerical and support staff as well, or are we talking only attorneys?
So I'm so glad you asked that question, and I really appreciate it. From the very beginning, I've always emphasized, I strongly believe that each one of us is equally important to the mission and success of the office, whether it's the person sitting at the front desk, who probably has the hardest job in the office, by the way, all the way to me. We're all equally important and valuable to the mission of the office. So these resources are available to everyone in the office without exception, including our interns. So even our interns can avail themselves of these resources when they're here in the office. And one thing I've really urged the attorneys to do is to be mindful of the impacts of trauma on staff. We often think about the attorneys because we're watching body-worn camera video and seeing the photos and so on. But don't leave the photos sitting on the copy machine. Don't use the conference room where we have the huge windows facing the rest of the office when you're showing that terrible video from the homicide case. So be mindful of the impacts on all staff. And there are times where I have to check myself on that. I came back from the King Soopers mass murder shooting crime scene one day, and there was a woman in the front who was crying. Member of the support staff. And I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "Just the shooting." And I actually thought maybe she had lost someone in the shooting, because it took me a moment to realize that she's just being impacted like everyone else in the community, but also everyone in the office. So and then with that in mind, we put a lock on who could access the case in our case management system. Like to go the extra step to make sure people didn't have to see the photos and the videos unless they were part of the trial team. So we give everybody these resources, but we also try to limit how much anyone in the office has to see it who's not involved in a serious case.